Welcome to IT Free Training. In this video, I will look at the new features available for group policy in Windows Server 2008 and Windows Server 2008 R2. The features that I will look at in this video are comments for group policy, starter group policy objects, network location awareness, preferences, PowerShell, and the new ADMX format. Although Windows Server 2008 R2 does offer improvements and additional group policy settings, as does every new operating system, the only new features it adds to group policy is the ability for group policy to be used with PowerShell scripts. The first new feature is comments. This feature allows you to add a comment to any group policy setting that is configured. Adding comments to group policy helps other administrators later on understand why the group policy setting was configured the way it was. Being able to add comments to a group policy setting like this will assist the administrator in the management of group policy. The next new feature is starter group policy objects. Starter group policy objects are essentially a template that is used to create a new group policy. Like a Microsoft Word template or any other template, once you copy the starter group policy object to a new group policy, you are free to change it in any way that you want. This is useful if you are creating a lot of group policies with similar settings. It is hard to know what Microsoft was thinking when they named it Starter Group Policy, but I would say that since another part of group policy is called Administrative Templates, they may not have wanted to use the term templates again. The next new feature is Group Policy now works with the Network Location Awareness service. This means that Group Policy can now detect network changes. To understand how this works, consider an isolated computer that connects to the main office using a VPN connection. In this example, the remote user connects to a head office only to check their email. This means the VPN connection is only in use for short periods of time. Given that the default refresh time for group policy is 90 minutes, this means that this user may never have group policy refreshed on their computer. With Windows Server 2008, group policy now integrates with the Network Location Awareness service. This means that when the changes in network state are detected, group policy is notified of this change. In this example, when the VPN connection is established, group policy will be informed and will download any new group policies from the network. The Network Location Awareness Service detects any network changes. This includes the computer coming out of hibernation, a network cable being plugged in, or a wireless network becoming available. This helps ensure that your group policy settings are sent out to all clients and as soon as possible. The next new feature of group policy introduced in Windows Server 2008 is preferences. This was originally a third-party product called PolicyMaker. PolicyMaker was purchased by Microsoft and added to Windows Server 2008. Preferences help reduce the need for login scripts. It does this by allowing you to configure drive mapping, registry settings, services, files and folders, and local users and groups. With preferences, you can also target who you want the preference to be applied to. For example, you could target particular types of computers or users for particular preferences. The next feature is PowerShell support for group policy. In order to run PowerShell scripts that can administer group policy, the PowerShell scripts need to be run on a computer running Windows Server 2008 R2 or Windows 7. PowerShell support includes the ability to manage group policy objects in Active Directory, configuring flags in group policy. This includes settings like the block inheritance and enforce, which we will learn more about later in the course. Support is also included for creating and modifying starter group policy objects using a PowerShell script. Having PowerShell support means another dimension of group policy administration for group policy. The last feature, and one of the most noticeable changes in group policy in Windows Server 2008, is the file format has changed. Before Windows Server 2008, group policy was stored in an ADM file. The ADM file holds all the settings found under administrative templates. Sometimes the administrative templates are also referred to as registry-based settings since they make changes to the registry. Since group policy has a file-based component, there needs to be a way to replicate group policy around the domain. For this reason, the ADM file is stored in the sysvol share. The sysvol share is a file share that is found on all domain controllers and is replicated to all domain controllers in that domain. The ADM file contains all the settings that can be configured in group policy under administrative templates, as well as the interface which represents the first problem. What this means is for every group policy that is defined, the ADM file must be copied into the sysvol folder. It does not matter if you configure 1 setting or 100 settings. The complete ADM file is copied in the sysvol each time. Because of this, ADM-based group policy does not scale well. In a large company that has a lot of group policies, the sysvol folder can become quite large. The next problem with having group policy in the one file is that a small change will mean that complete ADM file will need to be replicated again. Windows Server 2008 does offer improvements for replication of the sysvol share, but in most cases the administrator will want to try to keep the size of the sysvol share as small as possible and thus limit the amount of data that needs to be replicated. The last limitation of ADM files is that they are language specific. Once you create the group policy in a certain language, anyone who edits that group policy will have to modify the group policy using that language. This makes it difficult when you have multiple administrators in different countries trying to make changes to the same group policy settings. In order to address some of these problems, Windows Server 2008 introduced a new group policy format called ADMX. The first difference with the new file format is that it is XML-based rather than the in-house format that ADM used. This makes it easier to understand and also means that it can be read with existing XML editing software. This is useful if you want to create your own custom ADMX files. The format is designed to work alongside the existing ADM format used before Windows Server 2008. But, as you will see in a moment, it is also compatible with existing clients. The next big advantage of the ADMX file format is that it supports multiple languages. This means that group policy can be displayed in any language that there are language files available for. To understand how ADMX works, let's have a closer look at it. The ADMX file itself is a language-neutral file. The language-neutral file defines how the group policy settings are configured, but it is not created with any particular language in mind. To make the AMDX file more useful, it is used together with a language file which has the file extension ADML. These are combined together to provide the settings and interface. Since the ADML file is independent of the ADMX file, it can be changed at any time to allow the administrator to choose the language they want to edit the group policy in. Both of these files can be stored on the local computer or in a central store. This brings up the question, what is stored in the sysvol folder? In the sysvol folder is stored the group policy settings. Notice how only the settings themselves are stored in the sysvol folder, which are very small compared to the files that define the settings and interface. You may be wondering how the old ADM files fit into all this. The ADM files are stored in the sysvol folder. However, the output from the ADM file is the same setting file that is generated using the ADMX and ADML files. This is why ADM and ADMX files can be used in the same domain without any issue. Both systems essentially output the same output setting file that can be read by any group policy client. A lot of administrators may already be using the new ADMX file format and not even know it. To compare the two formats, ADMX uses less space in the sysvol folder, as the files defining the settings, language, and interface do not need to be stored in the sysvol folder. The only information that needs to be stored in the sysvol folder is the setting file. ADMX files also support multiple languages. ADM files only support one language at a time. ADMX allows different administrators to use different ADML files, which means that each administrator can edit the group policy in the language of their choice. ADMX files are in XML format rather than the in-house format used by ADM. This makes them easier to understand and also makes it easier to create custom ADMX files if required. Since both file formats output the same setting file, this means that both ADM and ADMX files will work with your existing group policy clients. For example, you could create a group policy using ADMX, which will work on Windows XP. The choice of file format does not affect which clients it will work on. Thanks for watching this free video on the new features of group policy. There are many great features that have been added to group policy, making it more versatile than ever before. This is only one of the free videos for group policy, all part of the free Active Directory course. Hope to see you again in the next video.